Marginal farmers do not make headlines because marginal farmers have adapted themselves to a very difficult situation. Increasingly, it is seen that marginal farmers are not dependent on agriculture for their prime livelihoods, but they have to take up supplementary occupations. They could be doing chokidari, they could be working as part-time drivers, they could be working as domestic helps, or they are taking some assistance from livelihood programs like the Mahatma Gandhi Rural National Employment Guarantee Act. In fact, 86% of the marginal farmers are dependent on incomes other than agriculture for their sustenance. This is something which came out in the report published uh, last week called the State of Marginal Farmers Report in the country. But obviously, there were other important things that were happening in the country which made headlines. The national testing agencies change in leadership, the row over the NEET exam, the collapse of the airport terminal T1 and at Jabalpur, those make more catchy headlines. And somewhere along the line, we forget that marginal farmers who constitute a very large number in our country, uh, 10 crore people, or 10 crore families actually are dependent on farming. And marginal farmers are defined by the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare as those who have less than 1 hectare of land. Uh, those who own up to 2 hectares of land are called small farmers. So, together, small and marginal farmers are the bulk of what the farming community in this country is about. But many of our policies, in fact, most of our agricultural policies, are directed at farming in general rather than with the focus on marginal farmers. Now, the question is that what is it that a marginal farmer has and what is it that a marginal farmer lacks? The only thing that a marginal farmer lacks and cannot get is more land than what he already has, because land is a major crisis in our country. You cannot multiply land, and there is a limit to how much land can be fragmented further. So we've already reached a stage where fragmentation of land has made many of our holdings uneconomic. But let's also remember that of the factors of production, land is only one of the factors. There are other factors like labor, there's the factor of capital, and there's the factor of technology. And nothing prevents us from investing more in capital, in technology, and in institutional support for the marginal farmer to ensure that his holding becomes viable. And when his or her holding becomes viable, then there is an entire ecosystem which will begin to change. And let me also point out that increasingly we are noticing that there is a feminization of agriculture, because as the migration is happening, more male migrants first move to the urban areas, only then do female migrants move in. But that is part of the larger issue that we're going to be talking about. But what I would like to emphasize is that every year, the Forum for Enterprise of Equitable Development produce, and this is the second year, in fact, produce a report which is on the state of marginal farmers in the country. And this year, the focus was on climate change and agriculture. As we are all aware, climate change is here. We can see it. We saw it in Delhi. We saw it all across the country. We've seen temperatures rising. We've seen flash floods. We've seen rainfall, erratic patterns of rainfall, and this is affecting all over the world. But the phenomenon is more between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, because this is where the bulk of the impact of climate change takes place. Now, friends, how have marginal farmers reacted to this? Marginal farmers have tried to delay their cropping pattern, because it happened automatically, because when rainfall got delayed and when there was a late onset of the Rabi season, then naturally the sowing of wheat and potato that got delayed. When that got delayed, there were fewer months or fewer days of extreme winter, and that affected the crop both of potato and of wheat. And this has had its own spiral, in the sense that farmers have to now depend on other sources of income. But there are many sources of income which can be done by the marginal and small farmers, including things like dairying, including things like beekeeping, things like protected cultivation, things like working for commodity groups and organizations, which can be done by an infusion of technology and by an infusion of skill sets. Now, one must mention here that two very good things have happened. One is that finally we have a minister in Shivraj Singh Chauhan who will be combining in himself the ministries of agriculture and rural development. Now, it is very important because the synergy between agriculture and rural development ought to have existed. It exists, but now with a common minister, the silos will break because today uh, many marginal farmers are also dependent on MG Narega, that is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Assistance Guarantee Act. That is the right to work, which is now a right which has been enshrined in the Constitution. Now, with the coming together of the budgets of the rural development and the agriculture ministry, one can actually expect a major change in the way our resources in the rural areas will pan out. There'll be much greater investments insofar as land development is concerned, insofar as development of water bodies is concerned, and if we can actually ensure greater access of water for the marginal farmers, then we will see a phenomenal rise. We can actually see a phenomenal rise in the growth, in economic growth and in agriculture growth, because one of the major things, what is it? Among the things which are most important for the marginal and farmers, in fact, all farmers, is access to water. In fact, it's a very simple statement that wherever farmers have access to water, they will have at least two, if not three crops a year. And whenever you have three crops a year, absolute poverty will be out, because this means that three times in a year there'll be sowing operation, there'll be tilling operation, there'll be weeding operations, there'll be a lot of employment that will be generated, there'll be lots of incomes that will be generated, there'll be lots of on farm, off farm, near farm activities that will happen on account of access to water. So I think MG Narega can play a very important role in the lives of marginal and small farmers. The second point is access to financial institutions, and I'm happy to report that over 80%, 86%, in fact, of the marginal farmers have received some form of direct benefit transfer. In fact, most of it has been through the PM Kisan. Now, the interesting statistic about PM Kisan is that from a peak of 10.2 crores, it had come down to about 8 point some crores, and now it's about 9.4 crores is the number of farmers who have received the DBT. Now, what it shows, it's counterintuitive, because the number of marginal farmers could have gone up because of fragmentation of land holding. But what is also happening is that perhaps a lot of farmers are not finding it remunerative at all to continue farming, and therefore a lot of other trends are happening. There's a leasing in of land that is happening from marginal farmers to large farmers. Certainly in the case of Punjab and Haryana, certainly in the case of Punjab, we find that the number of operational holdings has gone down in the last decade or so. The other phenomenon which we have begun to see is that while marginal farmers did want to respond to climate change and wanted to have a CRA, that is climate resilient agriculture. They know that they want to do it, but their sources of information are primarily the input supplier in the village, whose basic interest is to ensure that his own sales of his own products that goes up. So there's a little bit of an anomaly there. That's something that we will have to address, and we shall have to use much more of digital technology. In fact, when the report was being discussed, the Joint Secretary Agriculture, Praveen, did mention that there is a lot of scope for bringing about a digital transformation insofar as extension is concerned. That's a positive sign. Now, one is the dependence of the marginal farmer on the sarkar, but then there are other issues. I mean, why should the Samaj and the Bazaar not be actively engaged in the growth the marginal and small farmer. And that is where the whole concept of the responsibility, I won't use the word responsibility, but I would say the participation of the Samaj, insofar as the community-based organizations is concerned, whether it is the cooperatives or the self-help groups, the farmer interest groups, the FPOs is concerned, these are process-driven interventions, because let us remember that a lot of interventions are process-driven. So the Samaj can play a very significant role insofar as the process interventions for marginal farmers is concerned. And then you have the bazaar. That is what Feed and many other organizations are trying to do. Connect these marginal and small farmer with the players in the corporate side, so that the Samaj, the bazaar, and the Sarkar can all work together. In fact, Samaj, Sarkar, Sahkar, Bazaar, if we all work together, things can be on a better footing. And that's something that Feed is trying to do. There is one more element which ought to have been a part of this, and that is the political organizations, the Kisan Morchas of the political parties. They unfortunately are not part of this dialogue, and we will try to include that they also become a part of this dialogue, because the approach to the resolution of marginal farmers cannot be confrontational. It has to be conciliatory. It has to be, when we try to understand and find out what are the pain points, and how can those pain points be addressed, because unless these pain points are addressed, we will not have we will not unless the large number of our farming families, in fact, as I said, unless the 10 crore farming families are part of Viksit Bharat, there will be a major issue that we'll have to settle. I must mention here that I'm the honorary chairman of the forum which had brought out this State of Marginal Farmers report. You're welcome to download this report from the website of Feed, and we look forward to your comments on this. Thank you very much.